In the previous podcast, we brought together the full scope of arboricultural practices and how they support urban forest management. Now we're transitioning into a new domain, communication and public engagement. Because even the best arboricultural practices will not succeed without public understanding and support. Urban forestry does not happen in isolation. It happens in communities, on streets, in parks, and in neighborhoods where people live, work, and interact with trees every day. And that means communication is not optional. It is essential. Let's start with a key idea. Urban forestry is as much about people as it is about trees. Every decision, planting, pruning, removal, affects people. And people have opinions, expectations, and concerns. Understanding this human dimension is critical. Now let's consider why communication matters. Imagine a tree is removed from a neighborhood street. From an arborist's perspective, the tree may have been declining or posed a safety risk. But from a resident's perspective, that tree may have provided shade, beauty, and personal value. Without communication, that removal may be seen as unnecessary or even harmful. This is where communication bridges the gap. It helps explain the reasoning behind decisions. It builds understanding, and it helps align expectations. Now let's talk about types of communication. Communication in urban forestry can take many forms. It may include direct conversations with residents, public meetings, educational materials, or digital outreach through websites and social media. Each method serves a different purpose. Now let's consider clarity. Technical information must often be translated into language that the public can understand. For example, instead of saying structural defect, an arborist might explain that a branch is weak and could break. Clear communication makes information accessible. Now let's talk about listening. Communication is not just about speaking. It is also about listening. Residents may have concerns about tree maintenance, safety, or aesthetics. Understanding these concerns helps arborists respond more effectively. Now let's consider trust. Trust is built over time. Consistent, transparent communication helps build credibility. When people understand why decisions are made, they are more likely to support them. Now let's talk about conflict. Urban forestry often involves competing interests. Some people may want more trees. Others may be concerned about maintenance or infrastructure impacts. Effective communication helps navigate these conflicts. It allows arborists to explain trade-offs and find balanced solutions. Now let's connect this to program success. Urban forestry programs rely on public support. Planting programs, preservation efforts, and funding all depend on community engagement. Communication helps build that support. Now let's consider education. Public education is a key part of communication. Teaching people about the benefits of trees, proper care, and the role of urban forestry helps create informed communities. Now let's connect this to arboriculture. Arborists are often the face of urban forestry. They interact directly with the public. Their ability to communicate effectively influences how their work is perceived. For the ISA Urban Forest Professional Exam, focus on communication principles. You should understand why communication is important in urban forestry, the need to translate technical concepts into clear language, the role of listening in communication, and how communication builds trust. Questions may involve identifying effective communication strategies in different situations. Communication is what connects arboriculture to the community. It turns technical work into shared understanding, and it helps ensure that urban forestry efforts are supported and sustained. In the next podcast, we'll build on this by exploring public education and how cities engage communities in understanding and supporting the urban forest. In the previous podcast, we introduced the importance of communication and how it connects arboriculture to the public. Today, we're going to go deeper into one of the most powerful forms of communication, public education, because communication explains what we're doing. But education helps people understand why it matters. And when people understand, they are far more likely to support urban forestry efforts. Let's start with a key idea. An informed public is an engaged public. When people understand the value of trees, they are more likely to support planting programs, care for trees on their property, and advocate for urban forestry initiatives. Public education builds long-term support. Now let's talk about what public education includes. It can take many forms: workshops and community events, school programs, tree planting demonstrations, printed materials such as brochures or guides, online resources, videos, and social media. Each of these methods reaches different audiences. Now let's consider the content of education. Public education often focuses on key topics such as the benefits of trees, how trees improve air quality, reduce heat, and manage stormwater, proper tree care, including watering, mulching, and basic maintenance, the role of urban forestry, how cities manage tree populations, and why certain decisions are made. Now let's talk about accessibility. Educational materials should be easy to understand. Technical language should be simplified. Visual aids such as diagrams, photos, and videos can make information more engaging. The goal is to make information clear and relatable. Now let's consider audience diversity. Urban populations are diverse. Different groups may have different needs, languages, and levels of familiarity with tree care. Effective education programs consider these differences. They adapt messaging to reach a wide range of people. Now let's talk about engagement. Education is most effective when it is interactive. Hands-on activities, such as planting events or pruning demonstrations, allow people to learn by doing. This creates a stronger connection. Now let's consider long-term impact. Public education is not just about immediate results. It shapes attitudes over time. Children who learn about trees in school may grow up to support urban forestry policies. Residents who understand tree care may help maintain trees in their neighborhoods. Now let's connect this to urban forestry programs. Public education supports program goals. It increases participation in planting programs. It reduces improper tree care practices. And it builds community support for funding and policy initiatives. Now let's connect this to arborists. Arborists often play a role in education. They may lead workshops, provide guidance to residents, or contribute to outreach materials. Their expertise helps ensure that information is accurate and useful. For the ISA Urban Forest Professional Exam, focus on public education concepts. You should understand the purpose of public education in urban forestry, different methods of delivering education, the importance of clear and accessible messaging, and how education supports program success. Questions may involve identifying effective education strategies or appropriate messaging. Public education is an investment in the future of the urban forest. It builds understanding, engagement, and support, and it helps ensure that urban forestry efforts are sustained over time. In the next podcast, we'll continue by exploring stakeholder engagement and how urban forestry programs work with different groups to achieve shared goals. In the previous podcast, we explored public education and how it builds awareness and support for urban forestry. Today, we're going to focus on a closely related concept: stakeholder engagement, because education provides knowledge, but engagement builds relationships. And urban forestry depends on collaboration between many different groups. Let's start with a key idea. A stakeholder is anyone who is affected by or has an interest in the urban forest. This includes a wide range of people and organizations: residents, property owners, city departments, utility companies, developers, environmental organizations, and community groups. Each of these stakeholders has different priorities and perspectives. Understanding those perspectives is essential. Now let's talk about why stakeholder engagement matters. Urban forestry decisions often involve trade-offs. For example, planting trees may improve environmental conditions, but it may also raise concerns about maintenance, costs, or infrastructure conflicts. Engaging stakeholders helps identify these concerns early. It allows for more informed and balanced decisions. Now let's consider the types of engagement. Engagement can range from simple information sharing to active collaboration. At a basic level, it may involve informing stakeholders about planned activities. At a deeper level, it may involve consulting stakeholders and gathering feedback. In some cases, stakeholders may be directly involved in decision-making. Now let's talk about communication. Effective engagement requires clear and transparent communication. Stakeholders need to understand what is being proposed and why. They also need opportunities to ask questions and provide input. Now let's consider trust. Trust is a critical component of stakeholder engagement. It is built through consistency, transparency, and responsiveness. When stakeholders feel heard and respected, they are more likely to support urban forestry initiatives. Now let's talk about conflict. As we discussed in earlier podcasts, conflicts are common in urban forestry. Different stakeholders may have competing interests. For example, residents may want more trees, while developers may be concerned about space and costs. Engagement helps navigate these conflicts. It allows for dialogue and the exploration of solutions. Now let's consider collaboration. In many cases, stakeholders can work together to achieve shared goals. For example, community groups may partner with cities to organize planting events. Utility companies may coordinate with arborists to manage vegetation near power lines. Collaboration increases effectiveness and builds stronger programs. Now let's connect this to program success. Urban forestry programs are more successful when stakeholders are engaged. Engagement leads to better decisions, stronger support, and more sustainable outcomes. Now let's consider the role of arborists. Arborists often serve as intermediaries between technical information and stakeholder concerns. They explain, listen, and help find solutions. Their ability to engage effectively is a key part of their role. For the ISA Urban Forest Professional Exam, focus on stakeholder concepts. You should understand who stakeholders are in urban forestry, why engagement is important, different levels of engagement, and how engagement helps manage conflict. Questions may involve identifying appropriate engagement strategies in different scenarios. Stakeholder engagement is about building relationships. It is about bringing people together to support and manage the urban forest. And it is about recognizing that successful urban forestry depends on collaboration. In the next podcast, we'll continue by exploring conflict resolution and how arborists navigate disagreements and competing priorities in urban forestry. In the previous podcast, we discussed stakeholder engagement and how urban forestry depends on collaboration between different groups. Today, we're going to focus on what happens when those groups don't agree. Conflict. Because in urban forestry, conflict is not the exception. It's the norm. Trees exist in shared spaces. And anytime you have shared space, you have competing interests. Some people want more trees. Others are concerned about maintenance, safety, or infrastructure. Developers may prioritize land use. Residents may prioritize shade and aesthetics. And arborists are often right in the middle. So understanding how to manage conflict is a critical skill. Let's start with a key idea. Conflict is not inherently negative. It often reflects different values, priorities, or perspectives. When managed well, conflict can lead to better decisions. Now let's talk about common sources of conflict. Tree removal is one of the most common. Residents may oppose the removal of a tree that has personal or aesthetic value, even if the tree is declining or poses a risk. Pruning is another source of conflict. Some people may feel that trees are being over-pruned or damaged. Infrastructure conflicts can also create tension. For example, roots damaging sidewalks or branches interfering with utilities. Now let's consider the role of communication. Clear, honest communication is the foundation of conflict resolution. Arborists must explain the reasons behind decisions. Why is a tree being removed? Why is pruning necessary? Providing clear explanations helps reduce misunderstanding. Now let's talk about listening. Effective conflict resolution is not just about explaining. It's about listening. Stakeholders need to feel heard, even if the final decision does not change. Listening builds trust. Now let's consider empathy. Understanding how others feel about trees is important. For some people, trees have emotional or cultural significance. Recognizing this helps guide respectful communication. Now let's talk about solutions. In some cases, conflicts can be resolved through compromise. For example, adjusting pruning methods, selecting alternative planting locations, or providing replacement trees. Creative solutions can address multiple concerns. Now let's consider transparency. Being open about decision-making processes helps build trust. If people understand how decisions are made, they are more likely to accept them. Now let's talk about consistency. Applying policies and standards consistently helps reduce conflict. If decisions appear inconsistent, trust can be lost. Now let's connect this to urban forestry. Conflict resolution is part of everyday practice. Arborists must balance technical knowledge with social considerations. They must make decisions that are both scientifically sound and socially acceptable. For the ISA Urban Forest Professional Exam, focus on conflict resolution concepts. You should understand common sources of conflict in urban forestry, the role of communication and listening, the importance of empathy and transparency, and how conflict can lead to better outcomes. Questions may involve selecting appropriate approaches to resolving disagreements. Conflict is a natural part of urban forestry. It reflects the importance of trees in people's lives. And when managed effectively, it can strengthen relationships and improve decisions. In the next podcast, we'll continue by exploring how urban forestry programs communicate the value of trees and how they make the case for investment in the urban forest. In the previous podcast, we discussed conflict resolution and how arborists navigate competing interests in urban forestry. Today, we're going to focus on a closely related and equally important skill, communicating value. Because one of the biggest challenges in urban forestry is not just managing trees. It's helping people understand why those trees matter. Urban forests provide a wide range of benefits, but those benefits are not always visible or immediately understood. And if people don't understand the value of trees, they are less likely to support investments in planting, maintenance, and preservation. So communication becomes essential. Let's start with a key idea. Value can be expressed in different ways. Environmental value, economic value, social value. Each of these perspectives resonates with different audiences. Now let's talk about environmental value. Urban trees provide ecosystem services. They reduce heat through shading and evapotranspiration. They improve air quality by filtering pollutants. They manage stormwater by intercepting rainfall. They store carbon and help mitigate climate change. These benefits contribute to healthier urban environments. Now let's consider economic value. Trees can increase property values. They reduce energy costs by providing shade and cooling. They reduce infrastructure costs by managing stormwater. Some cities use tools to quantify these benefits in monetary terms. This helps communicate value in a way that decision makers understand. Now let's talk about social value. Trees improve quality of life. They provide shade, beauty, and a sense of place. They contribute to mental and physical well-being. They create more livable and attractive communities. Now let's consider the audience. Different audiences respond to different messages. City officials may focus on budgets and cost savings. Residents may focus on shade, aesthetics, and neighborhood character. Developers may focus on land use and project requirements. Effective communication adapts to the audience. Now let's talk about methods. Value can be communicated through reports, presentations, public meetings, and digital media. Visual tools such as maps and graphics can make information more engaging. Now let's consider storytelling. Data is important, but stories make information relatable. For example, explaining how trees reduce temperatures during a heat wave can make the benefits more tangible. Now let's talk about consistency. Value should be communicated regularly, not just during conflicts or funding requests. Ongoing communication builds awareness over time. Now let's connect this to urban forestry programs. Communicating value supports funding, policy, and public support. It helps justify investments in tree care and planting programs. Now let's consider the role of arborists. Arborists often provide the information that supports these messages. They explain how trees function and why management practices are necessary. For the ISA Urban Forest Professional exam, focus on value communication. You should understand different types of value provided by urban trees, how value is communicated to different audiences, the role of economic and environmental benefits, and how communication supports program success. Questions may involve selecting effective ways to communicate tree benefits. Communicating value is about making the invisible visible. It helps people understand that trees are not just part of the landscape. They are essential infrastructure. And when people understand that, they are more likely to support the urban forest. In the next podcast, we'll continue by exploring program advocacy and how urban forestry professionals promote policies and investments that support long-term success. In the previous podcast, we discussed how to communicate the value of urban forests and why that communication is essential for gaining support. Today, we're taking the next step, advocacy. Because understanding value is one thing, turning that understanding into action, funding, and policy support is another. Advocacy is how urban forestry programs grow, evolve, and sustain themselves over time. Let's start with a key idea. Advocacy is not just about promotion. It is about influencing decisions. Urban forestry programs depend on decisions made by city officials, planners, policymakers, and the public. These decisions determine funding levels, program priorities, and long-term strategy. Advocacy helps ensure that trees are part of those decisions. Now let's talk about why advocacy matters. Urban forestry competes with many other priorities. Transportation, housing, public safety, and infrastructure all require funding and attention. Without strong advocacy, trees can be overlooked, even though they provide essential benefits. Now let's consider what advocacy looks like in practice. It may involve presenting information to city councils, developing reports that demonstrate the benefits of urban trees, working with planners to integrate trees into development projects, or collaborating with community groups to build public support. Now let's talk about messaging. Effective advocacy requires clear and compelling messages. These messages should connect urban forestry to broader goals. For example, reducing urban heat, improving public health, managing stormwater, enhancing economic development. When urban forestry is linked to these priorities, it becomes more relevant to decision makers. Now let's consider data. Data strengthens advocacy. Quantifying benefits, such as energy savings or stormwater reduction, provides evidence. This makes arguments more persuasive. Now let's talk about partnerships. Advocacy is more effective when it involves multiple voices. Environmental organizations, community groups, public health advocates, and others can support urban forestry initiatives. Partnerships expand influence. Now let's consider timing. Advocacy is often most effective when aligned with planning cycles. For example, during budget planning or policy development. Understanding when decisions are made allows arborists to engage at the right time. Now let's talk about consistency. Advocacy is not a one-time effort. It requires ongoing communication and engagement. Building support takes time. Now let's connect this to professional roles. Urban foresters and arborists often serve as advocates. They provide expertise, communicate value, and help guide decisions. Their role extends beyond technical work. Now let's connect this to urban forestry outcomes. Strong advocacy leads to better funding, stronger policies, and more effective programs. It helps ensure that trees are considered in urban planning and development. For the ISA Urban Forest Professional exam, focus on advocacy concepts. You should understand the role of advocacy in urban forestry, how advocacy influences policy and funding, the importance of clear messaging and data, and the role of partnerships. Questions may involve identifying strategies to promote urban forestry programs. Advocacy is how urban forestry moves forward. It turns knowledge into action. And it ensures that trees are not just managed, but prioritized. In the next podcast, we'll continue by exploring program funding and budgeting, and how urban forestry programs secure and manage financial resources. In the previous podcast, we discussed advocacy and how urban forestry professionals influence decisions and build support for their programs. Today, we're going to focus on something that directly determines what those programs can actually accomplish: funding and budgeting. Because no matter how strong a plan is, it cannot be implemented without resources. Urban forestry programs rely on funding to support planting, maintenance, staffing, equipment, and long-term planning. Understanding how funding works is essential for effective program management. Let's start with a key idea. Urban forestry is an investment, not just a cost. Trees provide long-term benefits, but those benefits require upfront and ongoing investment. Now let's talk about where funding comes from. One of the primary sources is municipal budgets. Cities allocate funds to different departments based on priorities. Urban forestry programs must compete with other needs, such as transportation, public safety, and infrastructure. This is where advocacy and communication play a role. Programs must demonstrate their value to secure funding. Now let's consider additional funding sources. Grants are a common source of support. These may come from state or federal agencies, or from nonprofit organizations. Grants are often used for specific projects such as planting programs or research initiatives. Another source is partnerships. Private organizations, utilities, and community groups may contribute funding or resources. These partnerships can expand program capacity. Now let's talk about fees and revenue. Some cities generate revenue through permits, development fees, or tree mitigation programs. For example, developers may be required to pay fees if trees are removed. These funds can be used to support planting or maintenance. Now let's consider budgeting. A budget is a plan for how funds will be used. It includes expenses such as staffing, equipment, maintenance, and planting. Budgets must balance available resources with program needs. Now let's talk about prioritization. When funding is limited, programs must decide how to allocate resources. High-risk tree maintenance may be prioritized to ensure safety. Planting programs may be scaled based on available funds. Now let's consider cost-benefit analysis. Urban forestry programs often use economic data to justify investments. For example, demonstrating that trees reduce energy costs or stormwater management expenses. This helps show that investing in trees provides returns over time. Now let's talk about long-term planning. Funding is not just about current needs. It must support long-term goals. This includes maintaining canopy, managing tree life cycles, and adapting to changing conditions. Now let's consider accountability. Programs must track how funds are used. This includes reporting on activities, outcomes, and performance. Transparency builds trust with decision-makers and the public. Now let's connect this to urban forestry success. Adequate funding supports consistent maintenance, effective planting, and long-term sustainability. Without funding, programs become reactive and less effective. For the ISA Urban Forest Professional exam, focus on funding concepts. You should understand different sources of funding, the role of budgets in program management, how funding influences prioritization, and how economic data supports investment. Questions may involve identifying funding strategies or evaluating budget decisions. Funding is what turns plans into action. It supports the work that keeps the urban forest growing and functioning, and it ensures that the benefits of trees are sustained over time. In the next podcast, we'll continue by exploring program evaluation and performance measurement, and how urban forestry programs track success and improve over time. In the previous podcast, we discussed funding and budgeting and how financial resources support urban forestry programs. Today, we're going to focus on how those programs measure success. Program evaluation and performance measurement, because it's not enough to plant trees, prune branches, or respond to storms. Urban forestry programs need to understand whether their efforts are effective. And that requires evaluation. Let's start with a key idea. You can't manage what you don't measure. Evaluation is the process of assessing how well a program is meeting its goals. Performance measurement involves tracking specific indicators over time. Together, they provide feedback that helps improve decision-making. Now let's talk about what gets measured. Urban forestry programs often track a range of performance indicators. These may include canopy cover, how much of the city is shaded by trees, tree survival rates, especially for newly planted trees, maintenance cycles, such as how often trees are pruned, risk reduction, for example, the number of hazardous trees addressed, and ecosystem services, such as carbon storage or stormwater interception. Each of these indicators provides insight into program performance. Now let's consider why this matters. Evaluation helps identify what is working and what is not. For example, if tree survival rates are low, it may indicate problems with planting or establishment practices. If certain areas have low canopy, planting efforts can be adjusted. Now let's talk about data sources. Evaluation relies on data. Tree inventories, GIS systems, and field inspections all provide information. This data is analyzed to identify trends and patterns. Now let's consider benchmarks. Programs often set targets or benchmarks. For example, a city may aim to achieve a certain percentage of canopy cover, or maintain a specific pruning cycle. These benchmarks provide a way to measure progress. Now let's talk about reporting. Evaluation results are often shared through reports. These reports may be presented to city officials, stakeholders, or the public. They help demonstrate accountability and progress. Now let's consider continuous improvement. Evaluation is not a one-time activity. It is ongoing. Programs use evaluation results to adjust strategies and improve outcomes. For example, changing species selection, improving maintenance practices, or reallocating resources. Now let's connect this to funding. As we discussed in the previous podcast, funding depends on demonstrating value. Evaluation provides the evidence needed to justify investments. Now let's consider transparency. Sharing evaluation results builds trust. It shows that programs are accountable and responsive. Now let's connect this to urban forestry. Evaluation helps ensure that programs are aligned with long-term goals. It supports sustainability, resilience, and effective management. For the ISA Urban Forest Professional Exam, focus on evaluation concepts. You should understand what performance indicators are used in urban forestry, how data supports evaluation, the importance of benchmarks and targets, and how evaluation supports continuous improvement. Questions may involve identifying appropriate metrics or interpreting program outcomes. Program evaluation is how urban forestry learns and improves. It turns data into insight, and it ensures that efforts lead to meaningful results. In the next podcast, we'll continue by exploring urban forestry planning and how cities develop long-term strategies to guide their urban forest. In the previous podcast, we discussed program evaluation and how urban forestry programs measure success and improve over time. Today, we're going to step back and look at how those programs are designed in the first place. Urban forestry planning. Because without a clear plan, even the best practices and funding can become fragmented and ineffective. Planning provides direction. It connects goals, data, resources, and actions into a coherent strategy. Let's start with a key idea. Urban forestry planning is long-term. Trees take decades to grow, so plans must look beyond immediate needs and consider future conditions. This often means planning on a 20, 50, or even 100-year time horizon. Now let's talk about what a plan includes. An urban forest management plan typically begins with an assessment. This includes data on canopy cover, species composition, age distribution, and tree condition. It also considers environmental conditions and community needs. This assessment provides a baseline. Now let's consider goals. Plans define clear goals. These may include increasing canopy cover, improving species diversity, reducing risk, or enhancing ecosystem services. Goals provide direction for the program. Now let's talk about strategies. Strategies outline how those goals will be achieved. For example, expanding planting programs in low canopy areas, improving maintenance cycles, enhancing tree protection policies. Each strategy is supported by specific actions. Now let's consider prioritization. Not all actions can be implemented at once. Planning helps prioritize based on need, resources, and impact. Now let's talk about integration. Urban forestry planning is often integrated with other planning efforts. This may include land use planning, transportation planning, and climate action plans. Integration ensures that trees are considered in broader city decisions. Now let's consider stakeholders. As we discussed in earlier podcasts, stakeholder engagement is essential. Plans often involve input from residents, city departments, and other organizations. This helps ensure that the plan reflects community priorities. Now let's talk about implementation. A plan is only useful if it is implemented. This requires coordination, funding, and ongoing management. Plans often include timelines and responsibilities. Now let's consider adaptability. Urban environments change. Climate conditions shift. New challenges emerge. Plans must be flexible and updated over time. Now let's connect planning to evaluation. As we discussed in the previous podcast, evaluation tracks progress. Planning sets the direction. Together, they create a cycle of continuous improvement. Now let's connect this to urban forestry outcomes. A well-developed plan leads to more effective programs. It ensures that resources are used strategically, and it supports long-term sustainability. For the ISA Urban Forest Professional Exam, focus on planning concepts. You should understand the components of an urban forest management plan, the role of goals and strategies, how planning integrates with other city systems, and the importance of long-term thinking. Questions may involve identifying elements of effective planning. Urban forestry planning is about vision. It defines where the urban forest is today and where it needs to go in the future. In the next podcast, we'll conclude this section by bringing together communication, planning, and management, and how they work together to create successful urban forestry programs. In the previous podcast, we explored urban forestry planning and how cities develop long-term strategies to guide their urban forest. Today, we're going to bring together everything from this domain: communication, engagement, policy, funding, and planning. Because just like arboricultural practices had to be integrated, the same is true here. None of these elements work in isolation. Successful urban forestry programs depend on how well they are connected. Let's start with a key idea. Urban forestry is a system of systems. Planning defines the direction. Policy establishes the rules. Funding provides the resources. Communication builds support. And engagement connects people to the process. Each of these components plays a role, but it's their integration that creates effective programs. Now let's talk about planning. Planning sets goals. It answers questions like, how much canopy do we want? Where should trees be planted? What are our long-term priorities? But planning alone does not implement change. Now let's consider policy. Policy turns plans into enforceable actions. Tree ordinances, development regulations, and protection requirements ensure that plans are followed. Without policy, plans may be ignored. Now let's talk about funding. Even the best plans and policies require resources. Funding supports planting, maintenance, staffing, and program development. It allows plans to become reality. Now let's consider communication. Communication explains what is being done and why. It builds understanding and trust. It helps the public and decision makers see the value of urban forestry. Now let's talk about engagement. Engagement brings people into the process. It allows stakeholders to contribute, provide input, and support initiatives. Engagement strengthens programs and improves outcomes. Now let's consider how these elements interact. For example, a city may develop a plan to increase canopy in underserved areas. Policy may require developers to include trees in new projects. Funding may support planting programs. Communication may explain the benefits to residents. And engagement may involve community members in planting efforts. Each element reinforces the others. Now let's talk about consistency. When these components are aligned, programs become more effective. When they are disconnected, gaps appear. For example, a plan without funding cannot be implemented. A policy without communication may face resistance. Now let's consider adaptability. Urban forestry programs must respond to changing conditions. Integration allows programs to adjust more effectively. Now let's connect this to professional roles. Urban foresters and arborists operate within this system. They apply technical knowledge, communicate with stakeholders, and contribute to planning and policy. Now let's connect this to outcomes. Integrated programs are more sustainable. They maintain canopy, manage risk, and deliver benefits over time. For the ISA Urban Forest Professional Exam, focus on integration concepts. You should understand how planning, policy, funding, and communication interact, why integration is important for program success, and how different components support each other. Questions may involve identifying gaps or strengths in program design. Urban forestry is not just about trees. It is about systems. And when those systems are aligned, they create lasting impact. This concludes the communication and public engagement section and sets the stage for understanding how urban forestry programs are managed at a broader organizational and policy level. You've been listening to the Arborist-podcast. Our goal is to grow our collective knowledge, one domain at a time. If you enjoyed the podcast, please like, share, and subscribe to help us keep this momentum. Until next time, let's keep growing this community together.